Right, now we're going to do 3.4 part 2. So now we're actually going to solve these. So we can easily solve this sort of equation by taking the square root of both sides. So in 3.4 part 2, we used our new rule in order to factor the left side of the equation. Now to solve it, we take the square root. So we get x plus 4, because our squared cancels, equals, don't forget your positive, negative, and the square root of 4 is 2. Now, we can break this into two equations and solve. Actually, now we can solve for x, subtract 4 on both sides. So x equals positive, negative 2 minus 4. So we can actually solve this because positive and negative 2 are both whole real numbers. So x equals 2 minus 4 from our positive, and x equals negative 2 minus 4 from that negative. So we solve. X equals negative 2 and x equals negative 6. So here was our second example, or I guess our first real example on 3.4 part 1. Now we can square root both sides. So x minus 5 equals, the square root of 0 is just 0. We don't need the positive and negative because positive and negative 0 are the same thing. And then we add 5 on both sides. So for this one, x equals 5. All right. Square root both sides. So x plus 6 equals positive, negative, square root of 8. Subtract 6 on both sides. X equals, now because our 8 is under the square root, we can't put those together. So we're going to write our whole number first, so that negative 6 plus or minus, and if we put the square root of 8 into our calculator, we get 2 square root of 2. Now we still can't put the negative 6 and the 2 together because there's that square root attached to the 2. So this would be our answer. So now when we completed the square, we will have some fractions, but don't let that worry you, because remember, your calculators can do a lot of the work for you. So we take the square root of both sides. X plus 5 over 2 equals positive, negative. Now remember, if we have a negative square root, we need I. And then if I put that into my calculator, the square root of 7 over 4 we get the square root of 7. Oops. Square root of 7 over 2. Now we can move that 5 over 2 over by subtracting it. So x equals, we're going to put our negative 5 over 2 in the front, plus or minus I square root of 7 over 2. Now, we can write this just a little simpler because these have the same denominator, those 2's. We can just write this as x equals negative 5 plus or minus I square root of 7 over 2. We can only do that because those denominators are the same. All right, I think we have one more example. Maybe two, no, just one. So, square root of both sides, x minus 11 over 2 equals positive negative. I'm going to put the square root of 93 over 4 into my calculator, and we get the square root 93 over 2. Add 11 over 2 on both sides. So once again, x equals, we're going to put our 11 over 2 in the front, plus or minus the square root of 93. We can't put them together because one's a square root and the other's not. However, we can rewrite this as 11 plus the square root of 93 all over 2. I'm sorry, that's plus or minus the square root of 93 over 2. And there is our answer. So now that we've learned the whole thing, we are going to put everything together for example 4. So we start with what we learned in part 1. We have our little a equals big B over 2. And in this case, that would be 40 over 2, which is 20. Now 20 squared is not 20. So we need to subtract 20 on both sides, getting 4x squared plus 40x equals negative 20. Now then, we have to add 20 squared on both sides. So now we can factor this. X plus 20, and that whole quantity squared equals, I'm going to put the right side into my calculator, negative 20 plus 20 squared. And that equals 380. And now this is the new part we learned today. We take the square root of both sides, getting us x plus 20 equals positive negative 380. Oh, sorry, that should be the square root of 380. And subtract 20 from both sides. X equals negative 20 plus or minus the square root of 380. Now we're going to put that whole thing in our calculator. Or sorry, we're going to put the square root of 380 into our calculator to see if we can simplify that further. Square root of 380. So we get x equals negative 20 plus or minus 2 square root of 95. And that is our final answer.